Let me ask you something. If your retirement plan is a ghost city with a mortgage, do you still sleep at night? Because that is modern China. Real estate developers vanished, banks sweating, families holding keys to apartments that might as well be ATM receipts. This isn't just a cycle, it is structural and terminal. By the end of this video, you will know why China's real estate will not recover, no matter how many stimulus headlines Beijing throw at you. I remember walking into a sales center in Shenzhen years ago. Gold accented walls, perfume in the air, limited release banners blinking like a casino. Buy now or never, the rap told me. I didn't. Back then, people said I was crazy for believing that real estate prices in China could one day crash. Today, that same tower is a discount rack with elevators that break more often than the developers show up. So let's stop arguing feelings and follow the facts step by step. First, the evidence of the break. Prices and building. Nationwide price declines are broad-based in both new builds and second-hand units. That is not just a few bad projects. That is market-wide gravity. New housing starts have collapsed to 300 million square meters, a 30% year-on-year decline, and less than 1/5 of early 2021. If developers stop breaking ground, it isn't prudence, it is a confession. They can't sell, can't finance, and can't pretend. Some viewers may wonder, if housing prices are falling and supply is shrinking, shouldn't demand come rolling back? Well, only if the Chinese people can actually afford what is on the shelf. Let's talk about why buyers won't come back by looking at the affordability mess. Globally, a reasonable price to income ratio is 6 to 10 times household income. Painful, but still doable. In China's Tier 1, try 30 to 50 times. Shenzhen sits in the mid-30s. Beijing, Shanghai flirt with the 40s. Guangzhou in the 30s. Nationally, you're still miles above 6 to 10 times. Example, your family makes 300,000 RMB a year. At 10 times, that's a 3 million RMB unit. Already tight. Shenzhen math at mid-30s, around 10 million for a comparable place. That's not housing, that is financial cosplay. And here's the kicker. Even the few people left who could still afford to buy property in China today no longer want to, because the belief in Chinese real estate is completely broken by what has happened over the last several years. Chinese household wealth is heavily concentrated in property. When prices slide across dozens of major cities, middle-class net worth shrinks fast. Wealth shock changes behavior. Renovations paused, upgrades canceled. The national religion, buy any apartment, price goes up, is over. After the pop, housing stopped being an investment and become a liability you slip in. This is wealth effect in reverse. And adding salt to the wound, The pipeline of tomorrow's buyers is thinning out. Real estate runs on new households, but marriages in China are at record lows. Births are weak, and more young people are just opting out altogether. Fewer marriages today means fewer first-time home buyers tomorrow. So even if prices drop, structural demand doesn't magically return when the demographics and household formation engine is stalling. And seeing demand is just one side of the voice. The other, the plumbing, banks and local budgets that used to prop this whole thing up. Banks welded to property sector. Over 40% of China's banking system's loan is real estate related. So as prices fall and projects stall, non-performing loans rise, credit tightens, and buyers vanish, creating a downward loop. Prices going down leads to bad loans going up, which leads to both bank credit and housing sales going down, which results in even lower prices. Local governments in China have lost the cash cow. At the peak, land sales pumped trillions of RMB into local government budgets. Nationally, 7 to 8 trillion. Now, auctions are quiet, no beats, and revenues are a fraction of peak years. And you cannot run subways, schools, and civil servant salaries on IOUs. If your budget rides on selling dirt at ever higher prices, a down market is basically a fiscal heart attack. And if you want to know what finally killed belief in housing, look at the two flagship implosions, Evergrande and Country Garden. When the two biggest posters for China property always wins implode, you don't just lose two companies, you poison the well. Evergrande imploded, defaulted, and slid into liquidation proceedings. Country Garden followed with defaults and courtroom drama. Why this matters more than any single data point is China's housing machine runs on pre-sales and belief. Buyers wire life savings for apartments that don't exist yet because they trust the brand and the model. And when national champions collapse in public, belief dies. And when belief dies, showrooms empty. And once trust snaps, the horror stories multiply right where families reside. The long-standing belief among Chinese that housing is the safest investment, now tell that to families staring at unfinished apartments, halted cranes, and mortgage stress. If your unit isn't finished, or it's worth much less than your debt, you don't preach property always wins. You warn your friends. Belief systems don't collapse with a single headline. They collapse with millions of private disasters. Now, the obvious Hail Mary is stimulus, right? Cut rates, slash down payments. But in China's case, even stimulus won't save the market. Stimulus can pull demand forward, but it cannot manufacture affordability, trust, or babies. If households expect lower prices next year, they wait. If wages are flat, they wait. If they're underwater, they definitely wait. Banks with rising bad loans aren't itching to spray gasoline on the fire. The result? Policy sugar highs and then fade. That cat bounces, not lift off. Meanwhile, the damage radiates outward far beyond real estate. Property jacks an entire ecosystem. Construction materials like cement and glass, home appliances like fridges and washers, and a whole bunch of service jobs. When housing stalls, factories cut shifts, white collar and blue collar, they all feel it. This isn't just a sector story. It's basically an economy-wide choke. So, what would a real recovery require? Well, a durable recovery needs several things that aren't visible at all at this point. First, genuine demand at non-insane price-to-income ratios. Second, stabilized local government finances, so policy isn't whack-a-mole. And third, less speculation. Homes are shelter, not lottery tickets. What we have instead is crushed affordability, bleeding municipal budgets, and investors trying to catch falling knives. That is not a base for a bull market. That is a trapdoor. I expect much further price declines, inventory overhang, more unfinished projects turning into political liabilities. Developers will consolidate, the state will selectively rescue some and let others die quietly, and banks will restructure loans and massage the data. Transactions will bounce on policy sugar highs and then fade. Think those dead cat bounces. The long grind is a slow repricing down to what average families can actually afford, which takes years, not months. So how should real estate, how should you play it? If you are a buyer, assume another 30% drawdown is possible. Ask who your buyer is in 5 years. If your city's population is flat or even falling, what supports the price growth? If you are an investor, treat Chinese real estate exposure as structurally declining with periodic head fakes. Favor suppliers that diversified beyond the housing chain and avoid those levered developers and banks, masking NPLs with evergreen theater. And the bigger lesson is the simplest. Real estate can be a foundation. When it becomes the entire house, it collapses under its own weight. China financialized land, front-loaded decades of demand, and told a generation that home ownership was patriotic. The result is a whole nation overexposed to a single asset class and underprepared for the day that assets stopped rising. There's no policy that makes homes affordable and keeps prices high. Real recovery means accepting lower prices, building demand honestly, and letting speculation die. Until then, you don't have a bottom. You have a ledge. If this video cuts through the fog, like the video, comment what you are seeing in China today. Empty showrooms, unfinished towels, landlords cutting rent. Subscribe for the next deep dive about the great unwinding of China's land finance machine, how it was built, how it broke, and why the bill keeps getting bigger. China's real estate won't recover because it wasn't a market. It was a mirage. And now the mirage has just, evaporated in broad daylight.